Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Birds with Adam Caplan. Yeah, that's me, and Andrew DiCecco, that's him. And Inside the Birds big game coverage is presented by Green Lawn Fertilizing. We are so excited, Andrew, to have Green Lawn Fertilizing on board to bring you guys all the birds coverage leading off to kickoff. Get your lawn green, Andrew. That's what you got to do here with spring coming up. Go to greenlawnfertilizing.com/insidethebirds to get our 10% discount for surface. And Andrew, we've got spring coming up, right? We're in winter, but spring is right around the corner, and our friends at Green Lawn Fertilizing can help you. Based right here in Philadelphia, these guys are the experts in the region's conditions, including PA, New Jersey, and Delaware. They know how that tough drought last year went, and they've got this custom blend and approach that'll help your lawn recover. There's nothing worse, Andrew, than a brown lawn, and those of us who take care of our lawn, okay? I know some people live in apartment complexes, but if you're responsible for your own lawn, the worst thing is those darn brown patches that look so ugly. So our friends at Green Lawn Fertilizing get that job done. They clean that stuff up for you. Go to greenlawnfertilizing.com to get 10% off. This is a very limited time offer, so head to that link in our description and take advantage of that 10% off. Let the Eagles stress about what they got to stress about. You don't need to stress about your lawn here. greenlawnfertilizing.com/insidethebirds to take 10% off. All right, Andrew, let's set the scene here. So you got here, what, Tuesday? If I'm not mistaken?
Tuesday, yeah.
All right, so let's go to Wednesday. What was your Wednesday like?
Wednesday was Radio Row. Then it was going to the Chiefs media availability. Then it was going to the Eagles media availability, doing podcasts. Then it was doing writing some stories as well. So that was the Wednesday and Thursday for those who don't know, are the two biggest days for media availability. Not only are you getting the head coach and the quarterback, which you get every day during those availabilities, but you're getting all 53 players and assistant coaches.
So you were able to talk to, you talked to a lot of people, and you talked to some coaches. I think you got maybe one or two of them exclusive, which is next to impossible, or at least got them alone. So I know you talked to Bobby King, the inside backers coach.
Yes, I did. He was somebody that I was looking to talk to all season long, Adam, because obviously when he was introduced, not much was really known about Bobby King, but you see the impact that he's had on that linebacker room. Obviously, a lot of it has to do with Vic Fangio, but and talking to like Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond throughout the season, they often mentioned Bobby King and about his, when in doubt, choose violence. That was one of his sayings. And whatever you're doing, pretty much do it 100 miles an hour. And they talk about block destruction and the whole physicality in which they play with. That really stems from his coaching and messaging. So hearing what Nakobe Dean means to the linebacker room, hearing what his messaging is to his players, where the block destruction focus comes from, and even where his mindset is right now, because he is a coach who's now put him in the conversation in the foreseeable future about potentially being a defensive coordinator because of the job that he's done.
So another guy you talked to is a guy that a lot of people were excited about when he came to Philly because of the issues that the secondary had last year, particularly corner. And then they've got Christian Parker as a guy that I know you talked to.
Yeah, Christian Parker, that was a great sit down that we had, and that's podcasting on our platform wherever you get your podcast. But you go in there with a plan, right, for media day, and I wanted to talk to Christian because of the impact that he has had on that defensive back room, overseeing the safety room and the cornerback room. There's communication, there's accountability. He even left a empty gas can in front of Darius Slay's locker with a post note attached to it that says, "How many big plays do you have left in your tank?" And he talked about his motivational tactics and how he holds players accountable in meetings, and just about his philosophies and ideologies and why that blends so well with Vic Fangio. Because he was also with him with Denver. And
yeah, that's right.
He
That's right.
was one of only a handful of coaches that were actually stayed in place when Sean Payton took over.
Interesting. Yeah. So that's a good hire by Vic to bring him in from Denver because he knows him. So also, Media Row, right? They used to call it a Radio Row. Well,
yeah, Media Row.
The reason why they do it is there are not a lot of radio stations that come anymore because the radio business is where it's at, but tons of podcasters, websites, and so forth. And the coolest thing is, though, is to see the former and current players that are on Radio Row and, again, Media Row. And it was really cool. I'd never met Malik Jackson before, but I did hear, former Eagles defensive tackle. He's full of energy and had a lot to say. And I interviewed him when I was doing interviews with Sports Grid, and he was phenomenal. he's one of these guys who I wish I would have gotten to know during his career, because man, he's got stories, and he's a Super Bowl winner, by the way, with the Broncos. Speaking of the Broncos, so that was pretty cool. So now you were also here. You were at the Super Bowl in 22. Any differences for you from the 22 time that you had to this one?
Well, there was a little bit more media role. Jeff, and I were doing it for about 4 hours
That's
a
right.
day, and
Yeah.
that was a ton of fun as well. We were just, that was like my first experience. So we're flagging people down, we're talking and trying to book certain personalities, and we had some really good interviews. But I think now I go into it with a understanding of how to best where to dedicate my focus and how to maximize the media availability. I like talking to position coaches because they're just not available except for training camp. And you try to find different areas, different stories that aren't really there's not a lot of light shed on them. And I think that there's a lot to learn from one experience to the other. You go into it with that knowledge of where to go and how to best, utilize your time.
So you'll be here through the game. I know you'll be doing post game stuff with us. You'll be writing, and you'll be in the locker room. So what was the experience 2 years ago for you after post game last year?
Well, I was at the podium. So Hassan Reddick was there, Nick Sirianni, JalenHurts. That was, I got to tell you, it was like a mile long to get from where they had us go. We walked literally around the stadium. There was like me and like 5 other reporters, and we kept getting told to go in different directions, and ended up leading us to the post game risers and some of the more prominent figures in that game were talking. But it was just complete mayhem. But I think that the way that the Superdome is, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, it's a little bit better set up, better equipped to handle a Super Bowl in terms of logistics.
Yes, the last one, I think, and I was here for that, was 2012. That was the Flacco Super Bowl run with the 49ers, Colin Kaepernick. And that's when the lights went out during the game, which was
Yeah.
crazy. It was crazy. I'm sure we won't have that problem. And now I mentioned this when Jeff and I came back from the Senior Bowl. In Mobile, Alabama is like about an hour and a half maybe from where we are in New Orleans. Mobile and New Orleans had 8 to 10 inches of snow the week before we got to the Senior Bowl. And then you and I are here this week with Jeff, and it is warm, and it's in the mid to high 70s. It's just weird that they would get snow. In fact, I think some people, the locals, said they had not gotten snow in decades. Now, before we get started with the injury updates and discussion going inside that stuff, one of the cool things being down here, as you know, Andrew, is the restaurant scene, just the vibe. I kind of took a sort of like an unofficial poll from talking to people on the street, talking to former and current players, any coaches. Do you feel like more people think the Eagles are going to win so far, or Chiefs, or even what's your vibe on how people think this week's going to go for both teams?
Well, I was on Bourbon Street last night, and really the sentiment that I got at him was that a lot of folks were really confident in the Eagles' prospects of pulling this game off. Saquon Barkley is the name that often comes up.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of Saquon Barkley jerseys in the street, and it's almost in 22. There was a lot of folks that were really leaning towards Kansas City, but for whatever reason, well, obviously the Eagles are one of the best teams in the NFL. That's why they're here. But there's a lot of confidence from a lot of folks that they're going to be able to pull this off, and I think that they're playing their best football right now, so that certainly helps. And they're avoiding turning the football over, which is something that offensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs, Matt Nagy, was mentioning to me that really sticks out about what JalenHurts has done and how he's evolved as a quarterback, just being more comfortable within the system, his decision making, and really just trusting his receivers.
So, Andrew, off of what you're talking about and being out and about, so talking to former and current players and some former head coaches who are here this week, I would say that it's definitely more Eagles and Chiefs, but it's tight.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, well, the sentiment is that either the Chiefs will win a close game. And then this surprised me. This has been brought up by a bunch of former players. Is that if anyone gets blown out, the Eagles will blow out the Chiefs. I can't see it, but because their defense is so good, their point differential is really tight, so they play a lot of close games. They're not as explosive as they used to be on offense. So I just found that interesting. A couple of players said it might have been Jonathan Stewart, the former Panthers running back. I was able to talk to him and Jake Delhomme. I know these guys are just absolutely blown away by Barkley, as you mentioned. That guy, I mean, no one could have seen this coming. He's about to set an NFL record for most total yards in the season through the playoffs. So I can understand the sentiment. about Barkley and how great everybody thinks and so forth. By the way, when you talk to the Chiefs or you were at their media availability, what did they say anything about the Eagles players or anything that they saw was so great and stuff like that?
Yeah, I spoke to wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, who was at the podium, and he spoke glowingly about. I asked him about going against Slay because they
Yeah.
train. It turns out that they train against each other in the offseason in Houston at a place called Congo. DeAndre's trained there his whole career. Slay just a couple of years, but he mentioned how they've had some good battles. They're going to be talking a little bit on the field, and that's going to carry over into training, of course. But he said Slay still has a few years left to go, in his opinion, before he, while he's still playing like himself. George Karlaftis, I spoke to him.
Oh, cool.
He was very effusive in his praise of the Eagles offensive line. He mentioned that Lane Johnson, in his opinion, is a Hall of Famer. He said he's a beast.
Yeah, Karlaftis has come on after a slow start to his career. He's been a quality pass rusher. Those matchups are going to be fascinating. We'll talk more about the matchups in the postgame show with myself, Jeff, and our friend Greg Cosell. So, Andrew, let's get to those injury updates brought to you from by our friends at Stretch Zone. Go to stretchzone.com if you want to sign up for that free 30-minute stretch. Hey, I did it 3 years ago. I've been a client since then. Andrew, as soon as I get off the plane, man, I already booked it. I cannot wait to get stretched because, man, it's tough because you and I have been grinding here. A lot of walkings, a ton of walking, which is great, right?
Yes, we need it. After all the food I'm having here.
Yes, and I've had too much cheese. Yeah, I mean, it surprised me how good the pizza is here. I was not. I don't remember ever getting pizza here, but it's actually been pretty good.
Yeah, it has.
Yep. So you got to stay loose. So you absolutely need to sign up for that 30-minute free stretch. Go to stretchzone.com to get your free stretch. All right. So let's get to the Eagles injury. So today's Friday morning. We're 2 days away, man. I cannot believe it. We're finally 2 days away from the Super Bowl. So let's get to the Thursday injury report. And now I know some people keep asking me on Media Row, what's wrong with Devontae Smith with these hamstrings? I know he's been on the injury report for a number of weeks this season. To me, Andrew, at this point, I know everybody's going to play if they could run, and Devontae could run. I know he's been doing that. He'll play, but you have any concern here with Devontae and this hamstring issue, which has been lingering for a while?
No, not really. For one, he's been on the podium and had availability every single day. I know that's not always the best indication, but anytime you're available, you're talking to the media for the full slate of availabilities, that's always a good sign. And the Eagles, by the way, they've proven, whether it be with AJ Brown and his knee, that they're going to take every precaution and make sure that their players are as healthy as possible and get them to Sunday. I think Devontae's going to be fine. It's just I think right now it comes down to maintenance and him getting that treatment to make sure that he's good to go for Sunday. I think that's the primary focus.
So Zach Bond was added to the injury report last week. They had all clubs who are in the Super Bowl, both clubs, have to put out an injury report Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of the bye week. Even if they don't practice, it would be the estimated report if they had a game and what the injury was and what their status would be. So the good thing for Zach Bond is he took all his reps, all the first team reps on Thursday. He's good to go. Now, people were out of their minds with JalenCarter because he was limited on Wednesday with an illness. And people are, oh my God, what's going on? This came out of the blue. They're not going to all get the flu, are they? No, they're good. Only one player was listed with an illness. He took all his reps on Thursday, so he's good to go. I know our friend Dr. David Chow, the former Chargers team doctor, and Dickerson, by the way, has got a left knee injury. Because Dickerson, Andrew, did not finish the game, as we all know, against Washington in the championship game. He didn't play in the second half. People were concerned, and it didn't look good, Andrew, when he was pacing the sidelines. What are your thoughts here on Dickerson?
Dickerson's tough as nails, Adam. This is a player who often throughout the season he comes off the field and then he comes back on. He always comes on. He's always banged up. That's the way that he plays. He's not afraid to kind of muck it up in the middle of that line and play physical and do a lot of the dirty work. So that's going to happen. But he was another guy. He was on the riser yesterday. A good indication that he's fine. He's going to play. It's just a matter of what capacity will he be playing at. And I think he's going to be just fine in this. And sometimes adrenaline really takes over in games of this magnitude, and I have to think that's going to be the case here.
Now, with that left knee, now understand, go a little inside football here. So the Chiefs know what knee it is because they saw it from the game tape. So they'll know that. The players will be told that by the coaches because they got it from their personnel staff, okay, this is what it looks like. It's this knee. They could be, you know, if he's favoring, he was really favoring it, by the way. They could see if it's outside of his knee, inside of his knee. So that's something to keep an eye on, folks, as we watch the game. Now, here's the really good news, by the way. Kenny Gainwell is a step away from getting cleared. In fact, unless something he has a setback, he's going to get cleared. Concussion, the new knee injury. He took his normal reps on Thursday. That's a great sign, as you know, Andrew, because he is their passing down back. Most passing downs, he's in there. I can't emphasize this enough, how important it is from a coaching staff standpoint for JalenHurts on third down. So Kenny Gainwell, by the way, did you see him at any media availability?
Not Tuesday, not Wednesday or Thursday, but the fact that he was at opening night for an hour and a half, however long that is, and it's loud, I think that's really a good indication as to where he was even back on Monday in terms of the protocol. I think he's going to be good to go as well. I was telling Jeff this. I think that Kenny Gainwell is actually one of the more underrated players on the Eagles. He does a lot for them. He does a lot of dirty work.
He does. You're absolutely right. Let's Dallas Goedert with the ankle. He's good to go. Jurgens from the back. As I understand it, the back issue, you know, maybe it flared up in a practice, but there was a point weeks ago that it started to flare up a little bit, but he took all his reps in practice. He was fine. But then what happened was it flared up late in that week leading up to the championship game, as you know, and the Eagles really didn't want to play him. And he wound up playing, and man, he gutted that out. What are your thoughts on Jurgens here?
Yeah, I think Jurgens is going to be fine. Again, that's another adrenaline thing. But back issues, as we all know, can be fickle. And all it takes is, and I've had this happen to me before, all it takes is a sudden turn, and all of a sudden your back can sort of flare up. But at the Eagles, again, they've done a really good job of prioritizing health and player safety all season. They're going to make sure that Cam's about as close to full health, full strength as possible for Sunday. And yeah, I think he's going to be okay. But that's not going to stop Steve Spagnuolo from attacking up the middle and testing it out early.
That's right. That's right. And another guy who's working now. This one is fascinating because you wouldn't think CJ Uzomah meant really would have a chance to play, though he's going to be able to play if they needed him. But he's on injury reserve designation for return, coming back from potentially a surgery. The Eagles didn't announce anything, and they're letting anyone know. But when you go on injury reserve with an abdomen injury, more often than not, it's a muscle core surgery. But we don't know for sure. But bottom line is he's been out a while. Do they really need him? I know EJ Jenkins is a guy as you know, you've gotten to know and cover. They've tried to develop. So here's the thing, which is interesting. So they've got Covey, and we'll get to him in a minute. They got Covey and Uzomah on IR. And Jeff and I and yourself, we've talked about this. Like, okay, well, if they were going to release players to make room, who would go? I would say Lewis Cine would be the number one guy. I know how much they wanted to bring him to their offseason program. We know that from what we were told that the Bills were looking at him also as a linebacker, not just safety, which is interesting. But again, he's not a guy will not play. He's on the 53, but he's not going to play. There was never any plan, as we understand, to play him. It was just to get him in their program and get him into their offseason. So Andrew, if they activate Covey, and we'll talk, I know you have good information on Covey. If they're going to activate Covey and Uzomah, which I think is less likely, but let's say they did, who would go?
Well, Brandon Graham as well.
Oh yeah, Brandon. Geez, duh. Yeah, we'll get to the.
But the player, it's really only one player that I'm looking at. Wouldn't be Lewis Cine, because why would the Eagles sign him that late, right around the wild card game, only to know that they're going to have to cut him later? I think they're going to do everything they can to not have to get rid of him. But the player for me would be Nick Gates. Nick Gates
one. Yep.
is obviously he's not their backup center. He's going to be inactive on game day anyway, and he's not going to be a piece for the future for this team.
All right. What's the second guy? Now let's say we'll do the defensive injuries in a minute, but more of them. But if they were the second guy or third guy, anyone else you think would be potentially released?
Paris Campbell, maybe. I mean, I'm not sure what he really gives you on game day other than depth, because obviously beyond the top three receivers, then it's Johnny Wilson and Anais Smith. I don't think it would be Kennard. I don't think it would be Darian Kennard. It's not going to be Trevor Keegan. It's not going to be Anais Smith. His draft pick. And it's not going to be LIX. I think it would be probably Cine, to your point, Adam, or maybe Paris Campbell.
Yes, Cecine is a guy was it just never worked out with Minnesota. It had nothing to do, I'm told, with the injury. It was more that the Brian Flores just didn't think he fit into their defensive scheme. He former first round in 2022. He's got great size. This guy could play out of Georgia, another Georgia player, which is hilarious. But all of a sudden, as someone from another team who was actually here this week, I just happened to see who lives locally, someone in personnel who I met up with for about 15 minutes. He goes, man, what was with Howie ignoring that school in Alabama for decades, and all of a sudden he loves that school. Hey, if you can't beat him, join him, right?
This ain't the little itty bitty teeny tiny bowl. This is Super Bowl LIX. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 59. Scoring touchdowns is key to hoisting the Vince Lombardi trophy, and you have a shot to score big by betting on them at DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code BIRDS pregame, all one word. That's code BIRDS pregame for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5 only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Right, let's get to BG with the left. It's funny because they call it they're calling it an elbow injury, but he's wearing a brace. What can you tell us about BG? And I'll add something. Go ahead.
I'll tell you, Adam, the way that he was talking, he's going to play in this game. He was talking almost as if you're reading between the lines, that this is going to be his last game. He was excited. He was fired up. You don't see a player, by the way, who's on injured reserve, who's on a podium. So without you know what I mean? So I think that kind of indicates that where he is in terms of his availability for Sunday.
Yeah,
And in fact, to a greater point,
yeah.
Players who are on IR, like CJ Uzama, like Britton Covey, they weren't at media availability.
It's a great point, man. And by the way, it's his left triceps. As I mentioned with Jeff earlier this week, Hollis Thomas is like the only player that I know of. We did some research on this. It just happened to be Hollis Thomas, the former Eagle, who was with the Saints during the 2008 season. Is that he came back in 2.5 months, and yeah, he was a backup then. So he was not only was he a backup, he didn't contribute much anyway. With BG, and again, we have no idea what he'll be capable of doing in this game. I'm agreeing. I felt all week, the last show I talked about it, seemed like a fait accompli. He was going to play. He was talking about it. They can get to this game. The therapy that he did on it, he talked about this, was great. He kind of knew early on that based on the type of tricep surgery he had or what the issue was, that he found out. Because remember, you were there, and I remember you tweeted it. Graham told you guys right after the game in LA that he was done for the season, but that's before he really knew what that surgery entailed. And he talked about this, that he did his research on one of his recent interviews, and he found out that it would not be as bad as he thought it was. So this is pretty amazing, by the way. And I want to go back to you on this. Another thing I want to talk to you about, because you've been in the locker room, you've gotten to know BG and how the players feel about him. What does he really mean to this D line and mean to the players?
Heart and soul. He's the heart and soul. He's a leader on the field and off the field. And by the way, he's still playing at a high level. The game in which he got hurt in, he was playing. That was the best game of the season. And when he's out there, when he's talking, when he's getting guys fired up, the defense plays even better. And that his energy really radiates throughout the sideline. That will be a huge boost to a team that already has incredibly high morale if he's ready to go for Sunday.
All right, one more for you. Britton Covey with the neck injury. So we understand it, there was a nerve issue with it several weeks ago. Necks and being able to take contact is a problem, my man. So what are your, I know it's funny because they say full practice. They don't tell, that's whatever his normal reps were earlier this season, because he hasn't had a full practice, I don't know how long. I don't know that it means anything at this point. What are your thoughts here? You've covered this Covey thing pretty interestingly, closely, because it's a
Yeah.
pretty. You've got to know Britain, and I know a lot of reporters have. So, what are your thoughts on the situation?
Yeah, when it's easy, you can be a full participant because you're not taking any hits. But it's one thing to be able to run routes on air, to field punts, and knowing that you're not going to absorb any contact. But it's another thing to throw a player back there who hasn't been in a game since the Ravens game and say, okay, you're going back there in the Super Bowl, and now you have to worry about, do you alter the way that you play? Do you have to, if you can't take a hit, if you're not clear for contact, I mean, there's nothing they can do. So it's very unlikely that he would be available for Sunday.
Yeah, I would agree. He's been out for a long time. It's a shame. By the way, Chiefs very quickly here. So all 53 players on their active roster will be available. They're one of the NFL's healthiest teams this season. Andrew, that's another thing. Like, I know the Eagles 2017 team, Sproles, multiple injuries, Jason Peters and Big V filled in for him, but they still had great depth. Not only do you have to have great depth, you have to have great health. And the Chiefs have had like 2 players go on injury reserve of note this season. One of them was Harrison Butker, who's back for weeks. He had a knee injury.
Right.
So it's pretty amazing that they're this healthy this part of the season.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better. For both teams are pretty healthy going into this game, I would say. So you're seeing both teams that are really good, pretty close in comparison at full strength. I can't wait to see how this unfolds.
I have to ask you this question because we'll give our picks for the pregame show over the weekend. How do you see this thing breaking down, man? How do you think it's going to finish?
I think the Eagles are going to get off to a fast start. Eventually, Kansas City's going to settle in. They're going to have that counter punch. But this Eagles team is equipped to finish. Maybe the team with 22 couldn't finish, but this team can. And because they have Saquon Barkley, because they are playing turnover-free football, and I think this defense is playing with a ton of confidence, led by C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who everything that I hear from him over the past 3 weeks, it just exudes confidence and singular focus. I talked to Warren Burks yesterday. I said, what do you have to do to stay locked? He goes, it's a commitment. We know that we're out here. It's a business trip. We have to win the football game. Every player is locked in and focused, and they know that they're here to take care of business and finish the deal. This team's wired a little bit differently than the vibes that I got from the 22 version. And
you also told us, I remember one of the recent shows, that the locker room has changed, the coaching staff, the vibe is different. Is it more to the coaching staff setting the tone in OTAs? Like, what has happened here? I mean, these guys are good coaches, obviously, particularly in defense. But for them to feel this confident, you've been talking about this for weeks, how confident they are. Where does this come from?
It's the expectation. There's no gray area. The standard is established early in training camp. The demands are high, but the results are also apparent. So I think when you combine all those things, you're able to have that collective buy-in. And then, of course, while the coaches coach extremely hard, you also have someone like Nick Sirianni who's very receptive to feedback from players. He's also makes a conscious effort to relate to all of his players in different ways. So I think that's cultivated a really strong culture and a belief in all the different philosophies and ideologies of the coaching staff. And that's a scary combination when you couple that with a very strong football team that they can really beat anybody.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
All right, so Andrew, when we look at this thing, we'll see what happens in the game. I think it should be close. I really do. I think it'll be a great game. And I like what you said about the Eagles getting off to a fast start. They sure did in the first game, the first Super Bowl against Kansas City. It was a strange one, no doubt about it. But bottom line is, look for our coverage with Andrew on InsideTheBirds.com and all the audio, man, and the video that we've gotten from Andrew, all of our shows, Q&A, by the way, if you've missed it. And by the way, for Patreon members, we had an incredible one with former Eagles quarterbacks coach John DiCecco, of course, who won the Super Bowl with the Eagles in 2017. We had one for Patreon. John was a surprise guest. We added him at the last second, and he gave everybody 45 minutes, and that was absolutely incredible. He told some stories that folks no one's ever heard before. He's done that the last couple times we've had him, so check that out, patreon.com/InsideTheBirds to be a member. And Andrew, my friend, we will see you later today. Today's Friday. Yep, we got a long day, you and I. And we will see you after the game, everyone. We'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Be sure to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation.